Good evening. This is Maestro Cortello with a Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite modcast. Today we have a 2v2 on Medean Cliff Mines. Our first player right here is Rataxas, playing as the Eldar Farseer. The Farseer has a Eldar sword, whatever kind of sword that is. She is a support and buffing hero, also debuffing. She can even heal. Very nice with Banshees. Interesting hero. Rataxas' teammate is Manisz. Basically his normal teammate that he usually teams with. Manisz is playing as this infiltrating Kommando Nob. Starts out with a very, very powerful twin-link shooter. Can get a variety of different weapons, including a special shotgun shooter, a rocket launcher, and even a knife. He can get a variety of explosives as well, and he is particularly good against high-model, low-HP squads. On the other side of things, we have a Lictor Alpha, played by Ignivomous Velociraptor. The Lictor Alpha is a very, very powerful melee hero. Not especially tanky to start out, but he is also an infiltrating hero. And he can be extremely powerful. Very, very good hero. Finally, we have Fankater playing as the Commissar Lord. The Commissar Lord is a slightly tanky melee hero. He has his free energy shield right here that he's using. He's just up right in the face of these orcs, forcing them off, scaring them off. Very beastly human, probably has the biggest balls out of any human, any regular human in the 40k universe. Yeah. So this is a game. This is a slightly old game. I think it's about, definitely at least over a month. It's just kind of sitting in my pile of replays that I have. I'm just sitting on a mountain of replays. At this point, many of them, I don't even know whether they were replays that I received as submissions or if I have downloaded them off game replays. But I chose to cast this one since the players in this replay are very good. Their names are not as well known as, say, Tex, Holy Hammer, Toilali, etc. But although Rataxas and Manisz have started getting some exposure, but the players in this replay are very, very good. Manisz in particular actually beat Toilali at the Come One, Come All tournament that was held about 2 months back now. So we have a lot of pressure coming out of Manisz. Looks like he got a bit of a gen bash off against fankater. Fankater being very aggressive with his stomp. A bit risky to try to do that against the Imperial Guard with their big shooters. Some of the most ranged DPS you can get out of Tier 1 from any race. And the Sentinel is often just, it can be very difficult to micro it when playing against orcs. Fankater has interestingly not gotten his sergeants on the guardsmen, so they're still at only 6 men, and they have very, very poor DPS when they only have 6 men. Their DPS is basically the equivalent of a scout squad. And you very rarely see the guardsmen without their sergeant. It's such a no-brainer upgrade. It comes at a nominal requisition cost. It increases, not just increases the effectiveness of the guardsmen, but increases their cost effectiveness, because you get that 2-for-1 reinforcement. When you only have guardsmen reinforcing for 1 for 19 requisition, that's not terribly cost effective. It's still not bad, but considering the overall effectiveness of the squad with only 6 men is pretty bad. I'd say it's not very cost effective. And I think what Fankater was doing, he was probably just wanted to get his gens out faster and get those Catachans out faster. Although he has a sergeant on one of them. Rataxas is also interestingly choosing to forego certain upgrades as well. He has his Dire Avengers right here, and they have not gotten their Dire Avenger aspect yet, which is something a little more common, and people will often do that so that they can get a shuriken cannon out on the field quickly, or a ranger squad. In this case, Rataxas has also prioritized getting an aspect on his Howling Banshees first. And that's not as much of a big deal, since the Dire Avengers, their damage is actually not affected, no longer affected by having an aspect or not. So they still do very good damage even without an aspect. but they just get that grenade, they get fleet of foot, and they get energy shields and a health buff from getting the aspect. So the aspect on Dire Avengers is still ultimately a no-brainer upgrade, but you can just wait a little bit. We now have a Barb Strangler Warrior Brood out on the field for Ignivomous Velociraptor. And I think that can actually be a very good choice. At first, I was kind of confused, and I thought, like, oh, that would be a good choice against the Imperial Guard, but Ignivomous Velociraptor is teaming with the Imperial Guard. But it would be very good against the Orcs as well, since the Orcs are... Early on, they rely a lot on the DPS coming out of those double shooter boys. The Warrior Brood will be suppressing once that Barb Strangler spore hits. So they will be suppressing the shooter boys and actually doing pretty good damage. That Barb Strangler, the damage overall is not that powerful, and it wouldn't be doing a lot of damage to a tactical Marine squad. But because those shooter boys and also these Dire Avengers right here are not very tough, they are high model, low HP squads, even though the Dire Avengers don't have that many models. The Barb Strangler will be very good. And we actually just had a lot of mass suppression right here. Fankater and Ignivomous are actually doubling Rataxas and really pushing him back. Now Manisz is on the other side, punishing. He's not with his teammate, and his teammate is getting forced back, but he punished he punished the double. Basically, he punished Fankater's absence on his side by getting a full Gen Bash off. Now, the consequence is that Ignivomous and Fankater, or at least Ignivomous is still here, and he might be able to get a bit of a Gen Bash off. Although I don't know if he'll be able to get a full Gen Bash off. He's going to get at least this one generator that is nearly dead that the Lictor Alpha is hitting. Probably also the node, although it's starting to get to the point where Rataxas is trying to get back out to the field. However, his Guardian weapon team is being suppressed by the Warrior Brood. And that's actually one of the good things about that Barb Strangler Warrior. If it can get close enough to a suppression team, a regular suppression team to shoot, it will actually do a little bit better against them. Since that Warrior Brood, that Barb Strangler Warrior, it only relies on hitting a unit once. It only relies on having that little spore grenade thing land and hit a unit once, whereas all of the regular suppression teams, the ones that are kind of like machine guns, need to suppress over time. They suppress with those bullets firing. And as long as the Barb Strangler Warrior can just get its shot off. And right now, I mean, Ignivomous has been in front of Rataxas' base for like the past 2 or 3 minutes, so he's doing very well here, and I think a lot of it actually has to do with that Barb Strangler Warrior Brood. Shooter boys right here are very bunched up. They could be very vulnerable to, I think, some spore mines that are going to be put in their retreat path. Oh, that could be potentially very devastating. That's going to be, yes, a dead Slugger Boy. I don't think he'll be able to get another spore mine off in time, though, to get any of the shooter boys. But they did kill another unit. Actually, that was the Looter Boy squad. Fankater called out melee, and then Ignivomous actually did force melee with those Warrior Broods. Now, the Warrior Broods are, of course, by default a melee unit. With that Barb Strangler, they are set to range stance by default when they have that Barb Strangler. But their melee damage is still, I think it's not great, but I think it's still decent enough where you can do what they did right there, which was force melee with it. Zoanthrope now out on the field for Ignivomous. That's that Psychic Tyrannid artillery unit. Pretty weak. It only has 300 health, but it can use its energy to absorb damage. It's a conversion field, a warp field, or whatever you call it. It's actually a single cap for the red team. They've been pretty dominant. They wiped some generator farms, wiped some units as well. And Rataxas has already replaced his Slugger Boys, and they're going for the generator instead of fighting the Imperial Guard units. Now they're going for the Imperial Guard units. That Imperial Guardsman squad in particular I thought was in a bit of trouble, but the Sentinel did stomp them, and now it's actually Manisz forced off. These spore mines are really, really good. I've really been coming to learn just how good those spore mines can be, particularly against high model low HP units. And this could actually be a dead Zoanthrope right here. Oh no, what was he doing? And a sync kill by the Farseer on the Zoanthrope. Brutal. I don't know how that Zoanthrope got so out of position that the Howling Banshee's right there. So that Zoanthrope, I talked just a little bit about it to explain what it does, and now it's already gone, which is a little sad. And that it certainly, that was something that, had Ignivomous kept that alive, that would have been a major asset. The Zoanthrope, when left unchecked, can actually be game-changing because it can bleed units before they can ever get to you. It can be a very, very tough unit to deal with. So it's, and once you do have a Zoanthrope on the field, it often becomes a prime target. Like, that's often the first thing you need to deal with before you can really effectively fight everything else. Because if you try to fight everything else, you will get torn apart by the Zoanthrope. Now we have an artillery spotter, a smoke shell that went in right there, blinding these units, preventing them from firing, and now Rataxas is just taking the bleed. He actually still does not have the Dire Avenger Exarchs. He does have the Dire Avenger Exarchs. He does not have the Dire Avenger Aspect, that's actually very strange, since it's surprising to see him do that this late, since those upgrades, they do give the Dire Avengers quite a bit more health, especially when they have their Exarch. Manticore Strike can be very good against Shooter Boys, especially when they bunch up together. A lot of players will just bunch up their Shooter Boys together, mostly just because of the ease and convenience, and because most of the time they will just win engagements so handily that it often doesn't make a difference. We had a shotgun blast right there, the explosive shells. It seemed to have mostly hit the Catachan Devils and took them down to very low health. Although the result is that fankater, he did not bleed that much actually from just the high explosive shells, but he might take some extra hits now from the Weird Boy, from the Slugger Boys. He's going to lose his Commissar. He saves the rest of his army at least with that Sentinel Stomp, but that was a little risky. He was fankater, I think, overstayed his welcome there, taking a few too many hits, and ultimately did definitely take some bleed. Not too much, but he did take some bleed. In particular, the Artillery Spotter Squad is a nightmare to reinforce. 46 requisition and 5 power for the Artillery Spotter Squad. That's actually a ton. So that's actually something that really bleeds if you actually lose models off your Artillery Spotter Squad. So the lesson is, don't lose models off the Artillery Spotter Squad. They should be well out of range. Of course, things happen, and sometimes you will lose models. So Manisz might want to split up his Shooter Boys. He had to back off with his Shooter Boys there because the Barbed Strangler Warrior was just going to suppress them both, do some area of effect damage, and actually do some pretty good area of effect damage. I think the Rangers are getting much too close as well. They also don't have their Pathfinder gear, so it's interesting to see Rataxas not getting the upgrades that are normally considered really like no-brainers. And look at the damage that Barbed Strangler does. That's one of the reasons it can actually be so good against a lot of these high model, low HP squads. Now against Tactical Marines, you wouldn't see the health dip that way. Although the suppression could still potentially be useful. The Weird Boy in a lot of trouble. He did get knocked down, and I think he was lucky to get out of there alive. I think with a little more focus fire, that could have been a dead Weird Boy, and it's always terrible to lose a Weird Boy. He's so good, gives your army so much. We have a Kommando Nob who's trying to capture because they just don't have much. The blue team just doesn't have much time left, but a beautiful high explosive shells. Well, whenever I say that, it doesn't actually look like it took out that many models, but I think the Artillery Spotter is again down to... Wow, the Catachan Devil's down to... What the... Wow. So the Kommando Nob actually took out the Catachan Devils just chasing with his shotgun.
Fortune's tide recedes from us.
The blue team is running out of time. It's 470 VPs to 68. And it's actually a single cap in favor of the red team. Although the blue team is going to get this middle VP. The Manticore Strike is going to hit the knobs, which it actually does really good damage. Manticores are great. It actually took about half health away from those knobs. Now Manisz, I think he just tried to tank the damage because they're knobs, and they actually kind of can tank the damage. They're at about 60% health, but they still have all their models, so if they retreat right now and just restore their health, there won't be any economic loss, really, for Manisz right here. But it looks like he's actually electing to keep them on the field. He might be feeling that at this point in time, he really needs to keep everything, or as much as he can on the field, to win engagements in order to stay in this game. The blue team does not have that much left in terms of VPs. They're down to 65. They have a double cap. It appears this game must have been lagging during the actual game. Manisz also has enough red to do a Rox, so I would love to see that. Rox is, of course, a very good global, one of the most powerful nukes. In fact, in my opinion, it is the best overall nuke. And Manisz also has a very powerful tool for setting it up with the Weird Boy. If he can get one nice Weird Boy shot with the knockback from that plasma cannon, that can be extremely, extremely devastating. Now we have a Manticore Strike, I think did take out some kind of unit, and here is that Rox on Ignivomous' units. Unfortunately, Ignivomous mostly gets out of there alive. Looks like he lost his Lictor Alpha, but I don't think he lost any units out of that.
You must forestall the coming duel.
So the Rox, now there are things about that Rox. Like that Rox, it did not do much in terms of actually killing things, but it did buy the blue team some time by forcing Ignivomous off the field. He retreated to minimize the losses he took from that Rox, which is good. It's the lesser of two evils for him, because he doesn't lose his entire army, but he does lose the field presence, which allows the blue team to get some VPs back, get back in this game, allows them to build up some resources just over time from having the resource points to get some new units out to help them fight back better. Rataxas himself is actually in a very good position. He's probably going for an avatar with the resources he's floating, and he also has almost enough resources to do an Eldritch Storm, and that's another thing that can be used, even if he uses it in a way that does not kill his opponent's army. If it can just force a retreat, that can buy more time to stay in the game. And I mean, certainly, again, for the red team, getting forced off by a nuke is the lesser of two evils. The greater of two evils, of course, losing half or most of their army to a nuke. We do see that Doom of Malantai right now. They're used Cataclysm, knocking over these Dire Avengers, which still do not have their Dire Avenger Exarch. And, you know, for now, I guess that's okay, simply because Rataxas wants to get that Avatar out. And at this point in the game, that Avatar really is going to be much, much more important than the aspects on the Dire Avengers. It's also interesting to see fankater with a Sentinel still alive this late into the game. Fankater, and there goes a lot of stuff. Here's an Eldritch Storm, gonna wipe something, maybe. I don't think it actually wiped anything again. And we also had some Manticore Strikes. Looks like that Sentinel will finally go down. I was just going to comment about how it's been alive all game. Looks like fankater did lose something. He must have lost... I'm not even sure. Oh, I mean, he lost his Sentinel, right? Yeah. And Manisz losing his Weird Boy right here. About to disrupt all these Tyranid units, though. Yeah, I like the way it kind of knocks back a little slightly after the fact. The knockback from the Weird Boy explosion is slightly delayed. And here we go. Wow, a combination of the Paroxysm as well as a Cataclysm and a Manticore Strike. So a million things happening right there.
Let the flame of Asurian bless our Farseer in battle.
So the red team actually won the middle that time, but looks like the blue managed to capture the red team's natural VP. So they're still in this game. That Lictor is in a lot of trouble and might even get wiped right there. Tries a flesh hook. Flesh hooks to get the... Wow, that was a huge leap. I think that was just the Lictor's... Because I don't think that was the deadly jump. It didn't go high enough to be a deadly jump, but that was like a combat leap or something. So Lictor goes down, so does a Farseer. I think that actually favors Rataxas because he can, of course, have his teammate revive him. Looks like Manisz is actually hunting the Manticore right now. That's actually one of the greatest things about the Kommando Nob. One of his great assets that very few commanders have, that he's really, specifically really good for fighting, for taking out Manticores. He's infiltrated, he has his rocket launcher, he is I think he just maybe doesn't see the Manticore. He's still scouting for it. He doesn't know that it's right in the middle of Fankater's base. And I want to catch that on camera, even though there's other fighting taking place. And now he has found it. Yep, and that's a wipe on the Manticore. So he did get suppressed after I mean, obviously, once you shoot that rocket launcher, the Kommando Nob gets revealed, and then he was starting to get suppressed by the base turrets. And it would have been a long time before he would have been able to fire again. To circumvent that, he used the rocket launcher's ability, which does actually function as AV, even though it's also good against infantry, and that allowed him to just take out the Manticore. And that's something that the Kommando Nob is, I'd say, better at than anyone else. The closest thing you get to that from other races is actually from another Imperial Guard player with infiltrated stormtroopers with meltas, but that has a much shorter range. Fankater, as it is, has lost a lot of units. We have some Slugger Boys against some Kashyyyks. Yeah, the Kashyyyks need to micro out of there while the Catachans do some damage. Since the Catachans can deal with the Slugger Boys in melee or in range, like, it doesn't matter whether they shoot or fight the Slugger Boys, they can actually deal with them that way. The Kashyyyks really can't fight the Slugger Boys in melee. Looks like we actually have double flash gets out from Manisz. They both have Git Finders, increasing their range, although neither one of them has the blasters, which would also be quite devastating.
The enemy has
This actually does not look like good positioning. Actually, it wasn't that bad. In fact, Rataxas mostly just ended up killing or hitting some of the Guardians on his Guardian weapon team. Although that would have been very bad if Ignivomous had retreated out of there. It was very patient of him and very clear-headed of him to realize that he just could go to the right and basically dodge it entirely. I think there would have been some people there who would have seen a Wailing Doom and would have just retreated, and then they would have actually been retreating right into the Wailing Doom. Now it looks like retreating would actually be a good idea. The Doom of Malantai got knocked down right there. Ooh, Rangers actually took a chunk out of the Doom of Malantai's health, so those Rangers apparently actually a decent answer to a Doom of Malantai, taking out something like a quarter or a fifth of its health per shot. Looks like the Rangers themselves, or these are Dire Avengers, but the Rangers also in a bit of trouble as well. Looks like all of those units might have been ignoring the Termagants, and the Termagants, they're really not that powerful of a unit most of the time, but they are at level 4. So with level 4, here's a rocket run, and that rocket run was kind of sad, to be honest. That rocket run killed one flash git model. The rocket run has a huge amount of potential to wipe units. At this point, I think the rocket run would have actually been better off used against Rataxas than against Manisz. With most of Manisz's units being... Oh, and here's a Roxin base! Oh my god, Fankater is screwed! Fankater is just about to lose everything. He's got some of his units reinforcing, but he lost the Catachan Devils. Might still... And he does lose the Kashyyyks as well. And he lost literally everything. That was a horrible Rox. Horrible for Fankater. Fantastic for Manisz. I was saying that... Now that was a good use of a nuke. I was saying that rocket run would have been better off used against Rataxas than against Manisz, since Manisz has a lot of tough units out right now. Rataxas still had a fairly squishy army, although Banshee's at level 4. So that is the game. Pretty interesting. Pretty good comeback as well. And an incredibly deadly Roxin base at the end. But hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.